This is AM Agenda. Thanks for your company. With me now, Liberal MP Kelly O'Dwyer and the Labor MP and member for Wakefield, where Holden has its South Australian plant, Nick Champion. Nick Champion, first to you. I want to ask you about your speech to Parliament yesterday. It was a memorable speech, but on a very sad day for your electorate. Do you concede, though, that there has been an air of inevitability about what happened yesterday with Holden?
Well, look, the wheels didn't fall off Holden, the brake lines were cut. That's what happened here. And the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald today bells the cat, that the taunts from the government, the demands, the ultimatums from the government triggered this decision. And instead of having a government that went to Detroit, which engaged with the company, which lured the company to Australia, kept the foreign investment, and sailed through what is a very difficult storm. I'm not trying to blame the government for the high price of the Australian dollar or the low price of our competitors' currencies. But we could have sailed through this storm and emerged the other side, and we would have faced a different set of circumstances in a few years' time. But instead, what we got was ultimatums, taunts, and a government that just cut the brake lines on the Australian industry and sent it hurtling into what is going to be a very, very nasty economic dislocation for not just South Australia but Victoria and possibly for the national economy.
Kelly O'Dwyer, is that a fair argument that given where things are at the moment, the perfect storm, as Atkinson, the head of GM, said in his statement, talking about the high dollar and so on, as Nick says, if you got beyond this period, wouldn't the car makers once again be more viable?
Well, he talked about a number of other things as well as the high dollar. He talked about uncompetitive practices, the very low production that we have here, and the low demand in Australia domestically and also exports. But I need to pick up on a couple of things that Nick said, because I do appreciate that you feel very genuinely about this issue and you feel very upset about the workers in your electorate. I think we all feel for people who have lost their jobs, and we feel for their families, and we feel for their communities. But I think we have to be very clear in putting some facts on the table and taking some of the emotion out, because otherwise we're going to have a very, very confused picture of what's actually occurred here. It's not taunts from the government that have led Holden to pull out. It's very clearly a decision that's been made in Detroit, and it's clearly a decision that's been coming for some time. Now, I'm not going to lay blame at the feet of the previous government for the loss of Mitsubishi and Ford on your government's watch, because clearly there were factors at play there that also made those decisions overseas take place here in Australia. But let's not forget that in 2012, the Prime Minister Julia Gillard decided, along with the premiers of Victoria and also of South Australia, to put $1 billion of taxpayers' funds into Holden, and they said at the time that would secure production of Holden in Australia until 2022. Now, that's something that you proclaimed, that this was it, where we're going to have production with Holden in Australia until 2022. Now, that didn't happen, and within months we saw 680 jobs lost at Holden, despite this new injection of funds. So it's clearly been coming for some time. We're simply saying that you can't continue to ask the taxpayer to subsidise a particular company.
Let's look at the international setting, though. 13 of the G20 nations have a car manufacturing capacity. All of them have some level of subsidy.
Sure, they have some level of subsidy.
Taxpayers, and most of them contribute more per car than we do.
Yeah, but they also have very different workplace practices as well. You know, you can't only look at one part of this question. If you're going to look at the subsidies question, then you have to look at the cost of actually manufacturing as well, the input costs as well. And that is not something that the Labor Party is talking about. Now, the Labor Party is crying foul on this issue because it wants to score political points. But I think it has to be very realistic about what's occurred here in Australia. And the fact is that our production has been falling, our exports have been falling, and the cost of subsidising the industry has been going up.
Okay, Nick, I want to ask you though, because I know you obviously, understandably, empathise with your constituents, whether this is a big employer in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. But you've got to concede, don't you, that there's been a fair bit of inconsistency from Labor in government. The Green Car Innovation Fund withdrawn. Funding.
Kieran, I don't want to interrupt.
But that was reduced substantially. You had the fringe benefits tax as well.
$1.8 billion.
Well, look, let's just have a look at it. The new Commodore, if you look at the bonnet and the boot, they're made out of aluminium, and it's quite a new process, funded by the Green Car Fund. The Cruise, which is a car that we secured in the middle of a global financial crisis, in the middle of GM's Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the United States, just on the eve of that, we secured a new car, new investment on the line at that very, very critical time. So Labor, right, say what you like about us, we had a go at securing new investment, and we were successful in Holden's case. With Mitsubishi and Ford, they didn't approach government and say, if you do X, we will do Y. They just said, we're going. And we didn't taunt them from the dispatch box. We didn't attack them. We weren't briefing against them. I mean, we've got a government that was quite clearly divided, and the rest of us sat back and hoped that the industry minister would prevail and pragmatic decision making would prevail. I gave you a fair go.
Right.
I listened to you,
and
your
and
nonsense.
you probably learnt something.
I listened to you and your nonsense, right? And you talk about blaming the workers. That's all this government's got. Blame the unions, blame the workers, and here's the thing. The workers there were asked.
Kelly, let's hear Nick, and I'll come back to you.
The workers there were asked to give up $15 million worth of hard-won entitlements. This is after they worked 1 week on, 1 week off during the GFC. Name me one other workforce that did that. And do you know what they did? They voted to give up that thing, that $15 million worth of entitlements and costs. That's what the company asked for, that's what they got. And it was all coming down to this second pass. You have to pass through 2 phases of an investment decision. We passed through the first one, which was the $275 million that you talked about. We passed through that first pass.
Which was going to secure production till 2022.
First pass.
You said
we came to the second pass. We came to the second pass. And what nobody anticipated, Kelly, was an Abbott government that was prepared to just cut the brake lines in this industry, send it hurtling into the abyss, and with them, a domino effect. A domino effect through 2 state economies. And there is going to be a wrecking ball, an absolute wrecking ball through your home state. And you and others in the coalition, you always send up these smoke signals. You can never actually say it. You can never actually say it. I would have more respect for you, Kelly, and more respect for some of your brethren if you just came out and said, we don't believe in car subsidies. We don't believe in the car industry.
Nick, all right.
See you later. That would be more honest.
Kelly's response.
That would be more honest.
Well, you've had your rant, and now it's your turn to listen to me. So the first point I would actually make is with all this sort of confected outrage, although I do accept that there is a genuine concern underlying that, but the rant I don't accept is correct. So the first point I would make is that the Labor government played around with car policy, so much so that you had the CEO talking about the fact that there was sovereign risk in investment in Australia as a result of the fact that they were changing the policy. They were changing it on the Green Car Fund. They were changing it as well with FBT, $1.8 billion, and they were changing it with a carbon tax that imposed $400 on every car that's manufactured in Australia. So if you want to talk about increasing the costs, making it more difficult to manufacture in Australia, you have to accept that your decisions led to a cumulative impact on making it more difficult to manufacture in Australia. Now, the Labor Party now is standing in the way of us making it more competitive. They're standing in the way because they refuse to get rid of the carbon tax. They're blocking it in the Senate. They're refusing to actually get rid of it before Christmas. This is adding to the cost of manufacture in Australia. Well, you're interrupting now.
And it's not in GM's statement. Is it in GM's statement? Where is the carbon tax? You've got the GM statement here, haven't you?
No.
Where is it?
Where
is the carbon tax?
Nick, we've still got 7 minutes. I'll come back to you for a response. But Kelly, just if you can make your closing argument on this one.
Sure. So the Labor Party has made it more uncompetitive to manufacture in Australia. They actually have the capacity now to not stand in the way of keeping manufacturing costs high by blocking the repeal of the carbon tax. And I implore you, Nick, if you're genuine about it, then you need to talk to your colleagues and you need to say, get out of the way.
Nick.
The carbon tax appears nowhere in GM's statement. Kelly's got it here No reference to carbon whatsoever. No reference to carbon whatsoever.
I can
And you know
well,
what?
I'll quote it to you.
Just wait. No reference to carbon, and it's worth $40 a car. It's not the reason for
400,
this.
not 40. 400.
400. Right? It figures nowhere. It's about 75, I think, for Toyota and 40 for Commodore. It's just not an issue. It's just not an issue. And the problem with this government, right, is that they're all care, no responsibility. They all care, no responsibility. And it's just not good enough to come on these programs and set up straw men. Oh, the unions did it. Oh, we'll knock them down. Oh, the carbon tax did it. Oh, we'll knock them down. Just take some responsibility for your policy decisions.
That's what I've
This
asked
is a
you to
policy
do.
decision. This was a policy decision. Well, you know what?
It's a decision made in Detroit.
We took responsibility for our entire period in government, and we paid at the ballot box.
I didn't
and
hear
I can
the
tell you this,
unions complaining when Ford left,
I can tell
or
you this.
Mitsubishi left, and they're not leaving
Kelly,
until
And I can
2017.
I can tell you this: if you think that you can skate through this massive economic dislocation and crisis that government policy has caused, if you think you're going to skate through it, you are totally wrong.
But Nick,
because
No, we're
every
not going
time,
to skate through it.
every time,
We're going to work with
because
the
you've got to
workers.
understand.
Nick, let me just ask you something
Can I
in that
ask you, this is the
context.
worst
Let's ask you
possible
though.
time.
So Detroit is really listening to Question Time here. Are you saying that they had not made this decision, or at least indicated on their board that this is the way they were going to go?
Well,
because a taunt from Joe Hockey surely shouldn't affect a multinational.
Well, Kieran, look at what Holden did, right? So they got into negotiations with the previous government, and they said, give us 275 million. Blah blah blah. So we did that.
And they said that was
no,
it.
no. Just listen to me. I listened to
asking for
you.
more.
I listened to you. Just listen to me. So we went through that process. And then we went through a process of going and putting the workers through a vote, a very, very topical vote at the plant. And it was very, very difficult. Why would a company negotiate with the previous government, negotiate with its workforce, then try and negotiate with this government? Why would they do all that if it was inevitable?
Sure,
Why would
okay.
they go
Well,
through?
but the other
why
point
would
is,
you go through all that effort?
Hockey
And I tell
had
you
$1
this.
billion on the table, didn't he? Post 2016. Where do you draw the line?
Well,
right.
here's the thing.
There's an extra billion.
For the sake of a $500 million cut, they're now going to pay that in unemployment benefits, I can tell you. And this is the worst possible decision at the worst possible time. We've got a soft national economy, we've got two states' economies which are not good, and we've got a South Australian economy where we've got defence workers hitting the labour market in 2017, a whole lot of construction workers hitting the labour market in 2017, and now a whole lot of car workers. And it is going to be devastating for my home state and devastating for Victoria.
Which is why we need to work with the workers
and it is
to
a
make
result.
sure they're
And it is a
retrained.
result.
Just 1 second.
It is a result of government decision. And there are a whole lot of nails in the coffin, and Joe Hockey stood at the dispatch box and issued an ultimatum to the government.
Let's go to Kelly now, just to wrap up. The Prime Minister spoke about Olympic Dam. Nick Xenophon says it's pie in the sky. That sort of a reference to a project which has been shelved. What do you think should be done? Does there need to be the defence projects brought forward, or is it just financial support? Something needs to be done to prevent this dislocation that Nick refers to.
Well, for the 2,900 people across South Australia and Victoria who are going to lose their jobs as a direct result of Holden making this decision in Detroit, in 2017, I might hasten to add, so there is actually a transition period here, which means that there is time for us to work through these issues in a very methodical way. We're going to work with them to make sure that those employees are properly looked after, that they have an opportunity to gain the right skills to, again, make sure that they are in a job that is sustainable into the future. Now, I think that is a responsible thing for government to do, and that is what government will do. We'll work with the industry to make sure that happens, and we'll also set the right framework in place for our economy to make it easier for companies to make investment decisions, such as Olympic Dam, to make sure that these sorts of investment decisions can get off the ground to generate growth in our economy and to generate jobs.
I know it's been a robust last show of the year, but I want to thank you both for your contributions, and wish you both a Merry Christmas and your families.
Yeah, you
Thanks,
too.
Karen.
You too, Karen.
You too.
You too,
We'll see you both in the new year. Nick Champion and Kelly O'Dwyer. A quick break and we'll be right back.